The first thing coming to you, Scott, is I think we are looking at some of the worst defensive issues that we had in an opening round that I can remember. So Eels, Roosters, Titans, Dolphins, Brisbane put up a donut, but I don't think we'll talk about that later. But what are we looking at here, Scott?
Yeah, well, I think early in the season, I'll always rate a team on their defense rather than their attack. Attack is going to be clunky. That's that off-season rust and pre-season training that it doesn't quite replicate game fitness and game strategies, but normally you can rate a team on their defense early, and to see scores of 52, 42, 50 and 40 put up in the opening round, I think is a real cause for concern for some of these sides. Parramatta, they copped 52 against Melbourne. They were supposed to be on the improve this year. They looked like they hadn't met each other on Thursday night. They were absolutely awful after about the first 5 minutes. And that was 52 unanswered points as well from Melbourne. You have to remember, Parramatta scored the first try of that game and everything was looking rosy. And then, it went south pretty quick, didn't it? The Roosters on Friday. The Roosters, we know, are notoriously slow starters, but to see them cop 42 was a surprise. I thought I'd tip the Warriors in all fairness, but the Warriors were good, the Roosters were bad. The Roosters were dumb. They were really dumb. Just made a lot of bad decisions throughout the game. The Titans were awful in defence. I don't think anyone expected too much different out of them this year, but any chance of improvement under Josh Hannay, that looks a long shot at the moment. Even Manly, they were up 14-0 and then, royally were horrendous through the rest of that game. And the Dolphins copped 40 on Sunday, which I think is the biggest surprise. In all fairness, I've got the Rabbitohs as probably the best attacking team coming into this year. That left edge is off the charts good. But the one question around the Dolphins this year was, could they improve their defence? And the answer immediately off the bat is no. Lee, I'm interested in your take on all this as a coach and someone who's obviously prepped a lot of teams for seasons. Do you make as much of the defensive issues in round one as I do?
Well, I certainly, when I coach a team, I want my team to be solid defensively. I pick a more defensive side at the start of the competition for the very reasons that you've just outlined. The attack is 13 people moving in different directions and trying to get their timing right. Defense is often an activity where it's a team activity. It's a collective activity where everybody's moving in the same direction most of the time, and it needs a sort of a hey boys hey kind of approach. So I always prioritise defence, and if I've got a decision to make over a player, if they're slightly better in attack but weaker in defence, I may keep that player out for the first few rounds for that very reason. The other thing I want to look at, though, Scott and Darren, is we keep tinkering with the rules. Okay, and we keep tinkering with the ruck rules. The game is trying to be faster all the time. I have noticed as well that a few players are significantly slimmer than they used to be. For example, Leilua at the Dragons has lost 10 kilos. I heard something in the commentary the other day about some other player that's lost 10 kilos in the off-season. I think it may have been Fafita or one of the South forwards. There are two games. Well, there's actually three games that stick out. Manly and Canberra look like a rugby league scoreline at the end, even though it was at the high end, a traditional rugby league scoreline. To me, 40-30 is a basketball score or an AFL score. When we were in Vegas, we had two games of rugby league in terms of the scorelines that came out. They're traditional rugby league scorelines, if you like. That field was 63.1 metres wide, which means it's just under 5 metres thinner. Now, we keep tinkering with the rules. One thing we've not tinkered with is the size of the field. So rugby league perennially tinkers with the rules, but we never tinker with the field, or not very much anyway. And that sticks out to me, that they were the two lowest scoring games. I think we've devised a game at the moment where there are too much. There's too much going in the direction of the attack when they get some momentum. Defenses are trying to keep their composure under so much pressure. They're struggling with the momentum, and they're playing on a field that has plenty of space that can open up when you've had a few sixer gains or a quick rucks that cause your defense to struggle to get back in time.
Couple on that, Lee. Obviously, there's a pre-season, and you train for lengthy periods, but nothing compares to match intensity the first time you have it in a season. So players always talk about the increased fatigue in their first game of the year. Is that a major contributing factor? And the other second part of that question is, to Ernie Merrick, coaching soccer always refers to these ball sports as ground invasion sports, where you're taking territory off somebody. And his theory on defence is that obviously you can't win championships unless you can take something off someone else. Like, you might be able to aggressively score and run, but unless you can take one of their weapons away, sooner or later the better sides will beat you. Is that your theory on defence, that if push comes to shove, you can't take it off them?
To your first point about fatigue in first rounds, if you haven't prepared for rugby league, i.e., if you want to play the piano, you tinkle the ivories. If you want to swim in the swimming pool, you swim in the pool to train. If you're playing rugby league, quite a lot of our training can sometimes avoid some of the things that happen in rugby league, because we have pressures with concussion and whatnot in terms of too much collision and everything. So what happens is that sometimes players play the first rounds of rugby league and it's the biggest shock to their body. So yes, there are fatigue issues in the first rounds if the coaches don't get that balance right. To your second point about taking something away from somebody else, in the very first Zero Tackle Loose Carry podcast of this year, I said the game would gradually go back to an attritional style of football. Attritional sides. Melbourne Storm can be quite attritional. Penrith Panthers can be very attritional. They're patient. They do the boring things very well. You spoke, Darren, about taking something off someone else. You know what the best way of defending the football is? Keeping hold of the football in the first place. And with all this space that is opening up, teams are chancing their arm a little bit more with the other variable of connection and collaboration not being great at the start of the season. They're putting more ball down, which means their defence is under more pressure. Teams like Penrith, teams like Melbourne, even St. George in Vegas, very patient with the football. St. George probably didn't have enough to turn that pressure into points at the other end. Penrith and Melbourne Storm did. The game will go back to attrition. Remember where you heard it first.
But just on that, so going back to your other point, isn't this what the NRL kind of want? I'll throw this to Scott, though, too, because they want a faster game and it looks better, high scoring, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if that's, I don't know if you're a traditionalist or not, but this is essentially these scorelines that you're talking about, 30-40, 50-10, 42-18 in the Warriors game. Isn't this what the NRL are after? They want a high scoring game.
I think the NRL want high scoring, but I don't know that they want blowouts all the time. And I think blowouts are good for business. I don't think blowouts are good for TV. As much as I, found Melbourne's demolition of Parramatta actually quite entertaining. Like, as a neutral, you are going after about 60 minutes. You're going, what's the point of watching the rest of this? It's over, right? And I think they've gone so far with the rules, and I don't actually mind Lee's point about reducing the width of the field, because I think that is a big issue with the way six agains have come into the game, and there's more six agains this year. Remember, they've moved that back further down the field now.
The kickoff rules, Scott. Sorry to interrupt. They wanted to change the kickoff rule so that would curb the momentum.
Yeah, well, I'm glad they didn't bring that in. Personally, that would have been horrific. But there's more six agains. The game is every rule change they've brought in since essentially since COVID has been about making the game faster. And to your point, Lee, Leigh Lewis lost weight. I know Blake Laurie's lost a heap of weight. I'm just speaking as a Dragons fan there too, I know. But I think every club, you'd find stories throughout the off season of players dropping enormous amounts of weight to try and keep up with the game. I'm not saying the NRL are trying to eliminate the bigger guy, but that is the way it's heading.
But can you have, doesn't having a faster game with higher score, does that lend itself to more blowouts? Because I think it is, if you're a poorer team, it does. I think it's harder to keep up with it.
Well, the game is so momentum focused now, and you can see that in the games throughout round one and in games throughout the last couple of years. I think teams that are getting blown out still have a lot to answer for, because it is salvageable, but it is such a momentum-based sport now. And we saw that in round one. So yes, there's going to be more blowouts. There's no doubt about that. But you're also going to have more of those high-scoring, closer games like the Dolphins-Rabbitohs on Sunday. And again, that is an extreme example. They are probably the two best attacking teams in the competition. I don't think there's any doubt about that heading into 2026. So, them running up 70 points in round one will show you where things are headed. But yes, there will be more blowouts
Just
for sure.
Segue, I was doing a bit of this research into the Dolphins. So since the Dolphins joined the competition 3 years ago, they've conceded 40 points in a game 9 times. I wanted to see how that compared. So 131 times teams have conceded 40 points in that time. Dolphins sit at 9. They're in the middle of that. Dragons, Scotty, at 16 are the most. Tigers and Titans, 13. Bulldogs, 11. Cowboys, 10. Eels, 10. Penrith haven't conceded 40 points in a game since 2018. So it's 8 years for them. So they're the only side not to have done it in the last 3, and they haven't done it in the last 8.
That makes sense.
And that wraps this nicely, because back to my original point, defence wins premierships.